A man walked through a checkpoint with 2 firearms and a knife. That's not a freak event. That's a perimeter failure at the most protected political gathering in America. Tomas Allen was stopped. But the question isn't whether he was stopped. More, it's why the institutions responsible allowed him to get that close in the first place. And within 48 hours of the shots being fired, those same institutions had already converted the failure into a $400 million budget request. Not for targeted security fixes, but for a presidential ballroom. Originally billed as being privately funded. That's what institutions do with a crisis that they failed to prevent. Who actually benefits when fear becomes the governing justification? Well, here to answer that question on this episode is none other than my friend and co-host, Mr. Mike Termont. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be with you. The ballroom over at the hotel is the same one that we used for a convention just 2 years ago, so we're all familiar with it. It's the biggest ballroom in Washington. It is a logical place to have a presidential event, and I think that we all recognize that it's an easy target. It's a soft target. The challenge for Secret Service and local police and Capitol Police, all of whom were there, not to mention private security agencies, is enormous. But to your point, not everything went perfectly, and this does matter. We're going to get into it, but this does matter, and this is bigger than just, some jerk having been stopped in the lobby.
Yeah, and just to be a little more, this is the Washington Hilton, and it is a mixed event site, right, venue. So they had both public and private, and unlike a lot of other hotels in Washington that may host these political events, because the Hilton does such business there, it's also open to regular hotel seekers, right? People who are just there on vacation or otherwise have a room in the hotel.
Yeah, of course.
There's other events going on simultaneously. And I think it may be either one of the few or the only one in Washington that still operates that way to host major political events. So before we look at this specific incident, I thought it was worth mentioning that this wasn't a one-off type of event. This has been going on for years. They've hosted this event many times in the past, and other major events like the national convention you mentioned. But so in this particular case, let's set this up. It was the White House Correspondents Dinner, right? This is an annual event. And ironically, and put this in the back of your head, it's the first one President Trump has ever attended while a sitting president. And the reason I mention that and keep that back in your head, it may feed into a few conspiracy theories we'll talk about later at the end of the show. But
it'll feed into those theories, but you and I are not going to feed the theories because they're dopey.
Right, exactly. Cole Tomas Allen, 31, Californian, seemingly an educated man, graduated from Caltech, an engineer.
Yeah, not just educated, but maybe I don't want to use the word genius, but Caltech is easily the most difficult university in which to gain entrance in the United States in the technical field, and quite possibly the most difficult university in which to gain entrance in the United States, period. This is no schmuck intellectually. It's easy to look at what he did and say, all that planning, and then it came down to you trying to outrun people, right? It seems really dopey, but I just want to make that point because it might seem to one looking at his end game that he is just a fool.
Yeah. And again, a little pop culture here. Caltech is the Big Bang Theory university that all the nerds went to. So, when you hear Caltech a lot, for those on the East Coast, it might be similar to an MIT. It's a very prestigious school.
Yes.
Whether that has any effect on your opinion.
A lot of folks who could get into MIT could not get into Caltech.
Right. It's a very exclusive, very well-regarded school.
Yeah.
In terms of academics.
And tiny. Everybody knows each other.
Right. So Allen, rather, I keep wanting to say that his surname is Thomas, but it's Allen. Now, he was staying at the hotel ahead of this event, so he was I don't know what's the term, a resident of the hotel at that point.
A guest. He was already a guest.
Yes, thank you. That's the word I was searching for. He was a guest at the hotel. Uh, he never made it to the actual ballroom.
Right.
And he was caught, if you think of it as concentric circles, sort of in your mind's eye, he was caught on the outer circle, say. Uh, the
Of the
shot
ballroom,
of the ballroom. Yeah.
not of the hotel.
Oh, correct. That's the distinction, right? He was
Yeah, the last thing stopping people from getting into the ballroom was the thing that stopped him.
right, right. So, uh, and it was later discovered as the investigation got rolling. It's been leaked that uh, um, Allen, 10 minutes before he undertook his actions, sent messages to friends and family saying, uh, someone has to take care of these guys. I
Yeah,
refuse to.
he was not covering his tracks, hoping not to get caught.
Correct.
He
Correct.
knew he was either going to get killed or go to jail.
Right. So, Mike, let's start off with the initial thoughts on this one. When you first heard about this, you were on X right away. You made some, you made a couple of posts about it. Give me your initial thoughts as this was unraveling on Saturday.
This is badder than bad. It's bad for us in any number of ways, from a governmental standpoint, from the standpoint of preserving liberty. This idea that people can impose violence in an effort to coerce the government into behaving a different way, you can't have it. I don't care what you think of President Trump. There are
Right.
days, when you and I are over the moon with something he's done, and there are days when we're mad at him. That's normal, right? That's probably the way you and I feel about each other. I don't know, but you can't you can't have the situation where just because you're mad at the president or anyone else in the government, bring this down to a local level. You're mad at the mayor and you're going to go intimidate the mayor into doing something just by a threat. If we allow these threats to gain traction, a modicum of success, I don't mean total success, right? If he's able to get in the ballroom, for example, is someone like him then able to turn around and say, someone else who's like him, next time able to say, well, you saw that guy get in the ball, I could do the same thing,
Right.
behave the way I want to, or I'm coming after you. And maybe the you that I'm coming after isn't the president, but maybe someone who is a slightly softer target, but is in the same vicinity,
Right.
has the same level of, or a level of notoriety. I can figure out where they are. This is very dangerous for a government. So this thing has to be nipped in the bud. So the idea that he was able to breach one layer and get to the last layer is extremely dangerous. Now, the reports are that he had a shotgun. A shot, as you know, maybe not all your viewers know, that a shotgun can have a slug or shot, right? If you're running around in the lobby of the Washington Hilton with birdshot, you can piss off a lot of people, but you're not killing anybody. If, on the other hand, you've got buckshot, you might have a dozen pellets, each one of which is enough to kill a person. And from a distance, that's quite a dispersion. You see the potential for mayhem already.
Right.
Now, you might say, well, that didn't happen. He didn't get in the room. Okay, let me move on to the next level of ammunition. A slug, right? Instead of a dozen bullets the size of a 9mm bullet that can kill somebody, let's say that's all concentrated into one unit. A slug, right? A heavy slug. I don't know exactly how much it weighs, so I don't want to make a mistake here. But we've all seen, not everyone has seen them, but if you're in law enforcement like I was for 11 years, I carried a shotgun. I didn't carry a rifle. Very familiar with this weapon. We carried slugs, not shot. And the reason for that, two reasons. One is You don't want a dispersion. If you're in law enforcement, you're trying to stop a bad guy. You don't want a dispersion killing 11 other people while you're killing the one target, right? The second reason is because we wanted something on the road that could, if absolutely necessary, pierce a vehicle or a wall. Let that sink in.
Right.
That's its purpose, right? That's its purpose of a slug. I don't even know if you can get it, outside of a law enforcement channel. I don't know about all that, but a slug is a very dangerous thing.
Mm.
Walls don't stop, cars don't stop. A slug is a very dangerous thing. Okay, what if that guy has a slug, a huge piece of ammunition, right? With enough firepower to send 12 bullets, but it's all concentrated into one slug. You're telling me that the hotel wall is going to do you any good?
Right.
Glass is going to do it, right? A vest is going to do it. This is a very dangerous weapon. So if you can get a shot, here's my point. If you can get a shotgun to the last perimeter, in certain circumstances, that can be as dangerous as getting a handgun beyond the perimeter, because
Right.
you can shoot through whatever that last perimeter is potentially.
Yeah.
Extremely dangerous situation.
So, Mike, what was interesting, not on the same night, of course, but as, reports started breaking and, because it was the White House Correspondent Dinner, obviously a lot of press on site, on the premises, a lot of cameras, so it's not like we are lacking for a visual story here, or
Yeah.
audio for that matter. And a lot of these little clips that I've seen from various TV stations that were both in the ballroom and in that sort of perimeter area, there were two or three clips of newsmen saying, "Wow, it's kind of lax around here today. People are walking in and out. Nobody's patting them down. Not everybody's walking through the metal detectors, magnetometers, whatever the case may be." And there were three or four journalists prior to the incident who were on film saying, like, things are kind of loose tonight. They actually had made the observation. Now, look, it could be apocryphal, it could be, just dumb luck that out of 100 or 500 reporters, you might find a handful who said it kind of, it could have been
Yeah.
locked entirely, right?
Even
But
if they were wrong, right?
even if they were wrong. But now you have to address it because an incident did occur, and now you do have this footage of people saying, "Hey, things are kind of lax around here." What do you make of that?
I tend to doubt it, but I don't know for sure.
Hmm.
I tend to doubt it. I'm guessing that perception came from the fact that you could be in that lobby without having gone through anything magnetic. Wolf Blitzer is the reporter who saw this all go down, right? He was, and as soon as we heard that, we all knew why. Wolf is older than you and I are. Yeah, he had to go to the bathroom.
Hmm.
And it turns out that was exactly right. Turns out that was the story. Wolf was going to the bathroom. He was on the way back from the bathroom. He's on
Okay.
his way back from the bathroom. He sees this jerk running. He gets tackled or shots fired. And Wolf didn't know, if this guy was killed or hit or if anyone else was, because some cop jumped on top of Wolf to protect him. But Wolf was soon on the, for those who don't know, Wolf is this enormously long-term reporter with the CNN and host, and good enough guy for all I know. Um, he doesn't know how it ends because he's tackled to the ground and covered up for his own protection, but he's soon on the phone with CNN. Okay.
Right.
The lobby itself doesn't have a lot of protection. Presumably, you've got to go back through the magnetometer to get into the ballroom, but
Right.
in the lobby itself, you're just wandering around. You're going to the men's room and back, and you're not supposed to be there without a ticket. But to your point, the second perimeter, which is outside of the lobby, can be breached just by virtue of being a jerk and taking off running.
Right.
That's not much, and you don't expect someone to do that. So the question becomes, to your point, the question becomes, do you push the magnetometer and the hardened perimeter back to layer 2. So you've got 2 hardened layers that you would need to breach. And I would expect that people are starting to answer that question with a yes, whereas they might have thought the answer were no some time ago. And I
Right.
think that that's because not only this event, but this whole concept of this event with a shotgun.
Again, this comes back to, so let me diverge a little bit. When the Butler assassination attempt occurred, uh, there was a lot of flack that the Biden administration caught, right? That how could you allow this? There was how could a guy be on a roof and nobody notice him? And how could this blah blah blah? I mean, it was so incredulous. The lack of preparation, I would think. The actual Secret Service response was criticized during the Butler
Sure.
assassination, right? Um, to the point that people were so incredulous at this lack of security that they said, look, it's got to be a setup, right? They either staged the attempt, right? That's where conspiracy theories sprout from, right? So, but after that, when there was the Mar-a-Lago attempt, where they captured someone on the perimeter of Mar-a-Lago, that guy, you said, oh, wow, things are working, right? There's guys in the bushes looking out for the president, and
Yeah.
this guy didn't even get a chance to take out his weapon, that whole year, and you went, wow, they tightened things up. It's their president, blah, blah, blah. So they're protecting him. Maybe things are getting better. Maybe it was a partisan thing in Butler. Who knows, right? But now we're full circle again. This is not, the president has his loyalists throughout the administration, throughout his cabinet. So I think that the excuse that, well, they were lax because they don't care for this president, that's not going to hold too much water.
Nah.
So again, I have to ask, this is not the first time the Washington Hilton has been used for a political event. This is not the first time you had a White House Correspondents Dinner.
Yep.
Has this always been the case? And
Yeah.
it took one guy to again expose how relatively easy. And
Yeah.
again, we can't emphasize this enough. The guy never got within range to do
Right.
damage to the president, the vice president, and the cabinet. We get that. But
Right.
let's just assume that he just started opening fire in that outer perimeter. There would have been a lot of civilians killed. There would have been a lot of
Well, we've only witnessed these things pulled off by one fool, right? I know a moment ago I said this guy's no fool. One jerk.
right,
Use your imagination, John. What if it's 3 guys
yeah,
and they've all got shotguns
right,
and they breach that perimeter, and instead of trying to get in the ballroom, they start killing officers.
right. They're just going
So,
for maximum damage.
so that one of them can breach the ballroom,
Right.
right? But they take this more seriously tactically and not just try to run their way into the ball. You can use your imagination. My earnest belief is that these targets are extremely difficult to protect, and they have always been softer than what the American public has assumed. I think that we were all shocked when President Ford was shot at, right? And it was so easy. People just were in that crowd. There was nothing magnetic, in search. It's why Secret Service agents hate those receiving lines and the president's just running around shaking hands. There's nothing that would stop someone from taking a shot. These targets are very, very soft. And John, to your point about perimeters, and has it always been this way? I should have looked this up before the show. It didn't occur to me. You might remember, bail me out. Anyone out there who can remember the details of this, bail me out. Do you remember some fool climbed the fence outside the White House, ran across the lawn,
Got to the front door.
went right through the front door? Technically, it's the back, but we all refer to the Pennsylvania Avenue side. We all think of it as the front. Runs through the door, which is not locked, just opens the door and comes in. Runs down a hallway and makes it halfway to the Oval Office. Halfway to the West Wing, not halfway to the Oval Office. Okay. I think we all assumed that if you climbed that fence, you'd be dead before you got to the top.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? And I think all of us assumed that if you did breach the fence and started running, you'd be dead before you got to the door.
I'd expect landmines to be on the front lawn at this point.
Landmines, dogs, snipers,
Yeah,
explosions.
yeah.
Right. And by the way, if you were afraid of security, if you took security seriously, would you keep your back door unlocked? Who knew that that door was unlocked? Like what? Like,
Well, that's what astounds me. It's like there's security breaches that after an event occurs, you're like, that took a lot of effort. That took a lot of thought. Someone put a lot of resources behind this breach, and
removing the Venezuelan president. It took a lot of resources, a lot of thought. There were doors that had to be knocked in, people had to be shot.
laws
It's
have
not
to.
easy, but it
Yeah,
turns out you can make it halfway from the back door to the West Wing by just running
yeah.
if it's at the White House.
And you're right. And some things in hindsight though seem incredibly obvious. Like if you go all the way back to the JFK assassination, it seems incredibly obvious. Why would you have a president in a slow moving vehicle with an open top? You're just inviting people to take a shot from a distance. So you learn from that, right? And then you talked about Ford. You talked about the guy who jumped the fence. And each time supposedly, okay, we learned something. It was unfortunate, but we learned something, right? But you still see these lapses where even Joe Schmoes can say, well, I would have thought of that. Why would you start the intense security like right at the ballroom? Why wouldn't it be out on the sidewalk? Like I remember here in New York, I had an office on Madison Avenue, right near St. Patrick's Cathedral. If you're familiar with New York, anybody out there?
Yeah, that's a nice neighborhood, by the way.
And the president came by for a visit, and he was staying at a hotel. It was with foreign dignitaries. And as a New Yorker, you hate those things. Why? Because there's like a 4 block city block perimeter, which for people don't know, that might be like, say, a half mile square
Yeah.
around where nobody gets through. New York
No, you
cops,
got 50,000 people inside that square.
yeah, and that's not anything federal. That's the New York City cops who are just like, And you ain't getting through. If you
Yeah,
have to walk around, we don't care.
right.
And it's shocking to someone like me where I can't so the prime minister of Pakistan is coming and I can't get to my office for half a day. That's frustrating enough. And here we are at the Washington Hilton with in essence, the brain trust of the US government all concentrated in a
And the
relative
cabinet,
and the cabinet.
the
Chances,
brain trust and the cabinet.
I got it, Mike, I got it. All in this little area. And even if you argue that the ballroom was sufficiently protected where no one could get in, you could easily see a situation where, like you said, a small tactical SWAT comes in and just surrounds the place and says, all right, we've got hostages.
Well,
If
that
nothing else, right?
that is exactly right. These situations where you know where the president is going to be,
Yeah,
so much more dangerous than a moving target, right?
yeah,
No one was really when Gorbachev was leaving the White House on the way to the airport. He stops outside of my office, uh, near not exactly outside, 2 blocks down from my office. He's at like 23rd and M in Washington D.C. He gets out of the limousine and starts shaking hands, and there's easily 2,000 people surround him, and everyone wants a piece of him because he was such a reformer. He was more popular in Washington than he was in Moscow. He's not worried that he's going to get shot, not just because everyone loves him in Washington that day, but because he's a moving target. If you were an assassin, you would not know where he's going to be. You have no reason to expect that car is going to stop at all. You probably don't even know exactly what time he's going to depart from the airport. When President Trump attends the White House Correspondents Association dinner, everybody knows when, where, and how he's going to be there. So it's exceedingly dangerous. This guy obviously planned it for weeks, and he was on a suicide mission. So, to your point, the only way to stop that is with multiple layers of hardened perimeter, and that's got to be pushed out.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was startling to me when I heard about it because at first I said, is it one of those cases where some rando was walking on the sidewalk. Like when I initially, when the alert came over my phone, I initially thought, was it some guy, much like Mar-a-Lago, right? Like not to be dismissed, but at the same time, like, was he ever really in a position to do anything?
Right.
You know, the Mar-a-Lago potential assassin, who I don't know if he's been adjudicated yet. It's funny how you don't hear about it, but anyway, let's assume he's not adjudicated yet. Like that guy, you kind of said, yeah, okay, maybe he had bad intent, but he never really had a shot. He never really got close. They were on him like white on rice, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, they're
So
still going to charge him with attempted murder.
of course. I just meant I didn't know if they've actually tried him yet or not. I
Right.
haven't heard anything about it. But regardless, when the alert first came across, I thought it was that type of situation, that maybe somebody out on the street they found with a shotgun, and they immediately swarmed him and said, "Whatever, you're not getting in." Right? To find out that he actually got in and got that close, even in a
No, it's
mix.
frightening. I mean, he's closer than Wolf Blitzer when Wolf went to the men's room, right? So that's
Yeah,
pretty close because Wolf isn't going all that far to get to
right,
the men's room. It also brings up this guy who is at the Trump International Golf Course. I'm not going to say his name,
yeah,
who hung out, waited for the president to get to the seventh or eighth hole, sticks his rifle through the fence. See, he's not kidding around, right? He's made it far enough to get the rifle through the fence, and he's spotted not by someone on the outside of the perimeter, but someone inside the perimeter.
right.
He is spotted by a Secret Service agent on the golf course who sees the muzzle, the barrel of the rifle, sticking through the fence.
Right.
That is way too close, right? With
O-
a
o- agreed. But even in that situation, you're kind of like, okay, there's a reason why we have redundancy in this security, right? Like, so if someone for whatever reason slips through perimeter A, perimeter B should catch them, right? And that's why you have that redundancy, right? So, I mean, I agree that was way too close, but in some ways it worked, so to speak, right? They got him
well,
before.
sure, but let me continue making my case why this was such a failure.
Sure, sure.
There was not a thing but air between the muzzle of that rifle and the president.
Hmm.
There was no wall, no guy, no plate glass, no vehicle, no trees, no bushes, no berm. He just hadn't gotten close enough yet that he was, the guy had a shot.
Yeah.
He stuck his rifle onto the golf course and the president's playing golf. That now we're just talking about distance and line of sight, right? That is completely unacceptable. Anyway, my point is, you're right. I mean, the system eventually worked. He was surrounded. The president was surrounded by people with eyeballs. I think it's a little late in the perimeter development when you're saved by a guy with eyeballs. Is how this works. My point is that these targets are much softer than what we had thought.
Agreed.
That,
Yeah.
that it is much easier to kill a president than you wish, that we feared, and that this has to stop. And I really want your reaction to the following idea. Of all the things I don't know in this world, which is almost everything, right?
Yeah.
My wife would say it's literally everything. Let
Right.
me offer one more thing I just don't know, but is a big point of discussion lately. Our political environment, for all the reasons you and I have discussed, polarized, dehumanizing political environment in which we live. Does this contribute to an increased number of crazies wanting to take shots? I don't know that that's true, but it might be,
Mm.
right? It might be. I'm interested in your reaction to that. And does that mean, which is more important, that we change our political environment, or that we harden the targets?
I don't know that they're mutually exclusive. See, I think that, especially if you're talking from a libertarian or liberty point of view, the second of your options, the hardening of the target, is the more consistent with, I think, a liberty view, right? Because the first one is, it may or may not be a contributing factor, but the government should have no role itself in regulating that. So, for
Well
example,
said. That's
right,
that's for you and me.
you're right. For me and you, ignore us at all costs. But generally speaking, I don't want the government deciding what's acceptable political speech or any speech for that matter. Whereas I do see a legitimate function for government to say, political violence is not free speech. Political violence is coercion, because the goal of the violence is to bend either a party or an individual to what you think is right.
Yep.
If you're the attempted assassin, right? The prospective assassin. So, I to your direct question, the first one, I don't know if it's contributing or not, but the solution that would come out, as we'll talk about in a second, is more damaging to liberty than if you enacted the second, which is the hardening of the potential targets, because those targets signed up for what they're doing.
Yep.
Nobody forced Trump to be president. So
Yep.
that comes with certain risks. I'm not saying that it makes violence acceptable, but I'm saying that comes with certain risks. And if the government says, hey, we need to protect our officials, we need to protect our leaders, fair enough. I acknowledge that's a role for government. So
And President Trump has said as much as well. To his credit,
yeah,
I thought he handled the press conference that was less than 2 hours after the event took place. It was like 90 minutes after. It was
yeah,
very fast. I thought he did a good job there. I thought he handled it well.
surprisingly well.
It's
Surprisingly.
surprising well. You never turn to President Trump for your daily dosage of humility.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
as long as you don't have that expectation, I
Right.
thought he handled it really well. He does recognize that there's a certain amount of risk and that he has signed up for that. He was duly sympathetic for those who were put in danger by these decisions.
Right.
For example, his wife, for example, the guy who was killed by the would be assassin in Butler, would be presidential assassin, did assassinate the father
The
who was
father.
behind Trump in the stands. Tragic and not sufficiently told story.
Yes.
I thought that Trump did a good job of acknowledging uh, all of that. I also don't know whether our political environment contributes to this, and I agree with you. The bar is set very, very high. Legally speaking, the bar is set very, very high to be able to go to court and say what this person said is not protected by the First Amendment, was a call to violence, which was credible, actionable, intentional.
Right.
It's a very high bar to clear. And I think it should, I agree with you. What you're saying is it should remain a high bar to clear. We don't want the government involved in regulating this stuff, except when it does clear that enormously high bar. Having said that, John, there are people who say things that I find unacceptable. I don't mean they need to go to jail for it. I don't mean I want the FBI to knock on their door.
They're stupid remarks.
There was, I'm not going to name names because I don't like to bring attention to stupid accounts, but I noticed that someone was, someone, on our Twitter account, I posted something about, political violence is unacceptable, the most generic,
Right.
right? Inoffensive. Well, someone took me to task for that, in effect saying, when you're, these are not the words that were used, but, when you're oppressed, you need to take matters in your own hands. That is such garbage. It is such garbage. The, the people who were responsible for this assassination attempt were not oppressed. They had not been suppressed. Number one. Number two, even if they felt that way, even if it were true, political violence is unacceptable. By the way, it's also stupid and ineffective. Just by the way, I thought I'd just throw that on the heap, right?
Right.
You don't actually get your way by running across the lobby of the Washington Hilton. He has not advanced his, whatever weird cause he had, he did
Right.
not advance his cause.
Right.
And I think that we need to do a good job in this country of pointing out that not only do we not find it acceptable to call for violence, we should not find it acceptable to have conversations that excuse it after the fact, or in effect excuse it by saying, well, I get it. One of the things that really bothered me a great deal was the jerk whose name I'm not going to use, uh, obviously an Italian name. I love Italians. I don't mean like, this is why he did it. But he's
Right.
an Italian, just so you know who I'm talking about. He has an Italian name. He killed the insurance executive in New York City. Okay. He became a star, right? And for a lot of folks still is, weirdly.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a lot of folks still is, and that is got to be the definition of weird. That I find absolutely unacceptable to the point of being a moral problem and un-American. I would go so far as to call it unhuman. The fact that you would find yourself sympathetic with a guy who took it upon himself to kill somebody because of what ultimately was a political view. If you believe that an insurance executive is responsible for your problems, even if your problems are medical or financial or medical financial insurance,
Right.
even if that guy ran the company that was directly responsible for having made a decision that was bad for you,
Right.
you're an idiot. You're actually an idiot if you think that what you did was anything other than political. It was not operational, actionable, advancing your freedom, advancing your no. It was a stupid political view. And people who support people like this have stupid political views. And I use the word political in as demeaning a fashion as I can muster.
Right.
You're not even up to the level of an analytic view. Like, you don't even understand the system that you hate.
Right.
Our system is imperfect. I'm not trying to stand up for it in all of its granular glory. But if you believe that political violence, that killing an insurance executive is going to help advance your cause, as stupid as I may think your cause is, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you literally don't understand how this system works. You don't
Right.
understand how markets work, insurance works. You don't understand the medical establishment. You're nothing but a political hack.
Right.
And this idea of embracing these people afterward, that makes you a political hack also. If you're writing letters to this guy in jail saying, I get, why you did it and I think you're great, and if you're posting that garbage online, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. It's not merely an ethical problem.
Right.
It's a problem with your ability to perceive the world. You're just being stupid and you should be embarrassed.
And I while I agree with everything you said, Mike, again, there's a bright line for me, which is the way you take care of that is by setting examples. If you're in the political space,
Yep.
if you're in the thought space, you
Yep.
don't do it through legislation, and you don't
Yep.
do it through bullying and jawboning, right?
Yep.
So, as a segue, that's why I think part of this now has to be the immediate reaction to the event on Saturday. Like you said, immediately after the incident, President Trump, I thought, had a very reasoned, appropriate response. He said, I would have liked to see the show go on. He called it a show, right? He goes, I would have liked to see the show go on, but I'm going to do what law enforcement tells me to do right now because they're in
Yep.
charge. They're the ones making the decision. I thought that was the correct response, very
Yep.
reasoned, very
Yep.
presidential. As much as my tongue is on fire right now, I have to give the president credit for that. However, less than 24 hours later, he was calling for Jimmy Kimmel, his longtime nemesis on the free speech front, to be fired from from Disney ABC. He was calling on the Disney CEO to take a stand. I think that was his quote. His
Yep.
first lady, Melania, asked for the same thing. Now,
Yep.
this stemmed from a joke
Yep.
that the president claims contributes and his supporters claim contributes to the rhetoric and atmosphere of violence that the left is fostering. To wit, Jimmy Kimmel, in a pre-recorded joke, this has to be emphasized. It was a pre-recorded joke prior to the incident where he said, acting in the role of an MC, he said, "Oh, look at the First Lady, Melania," and there was a stand-in for Melania in the sketch. She has the glow of an expectant widow. Okay, now that was the joke.
And the
The
joke was delivered before the event.
Yes, it was. Everything was done pre-incident.
It was recorded and delivered before the event. This was not a joke about the event.
Right. And I would argue that matters even less in the context of what I'm about to say. But to be clear, yes, you're right. It was prior to the incident. The context of the joke itself was that Trump is old and that Trump is fragile and that Trump seems to be on the decline physically, right? It was not clearly like she has the glow of an expectant widow who's about to have her husband assassinated. That was not the context of the joke.
Right.
And again, even if it were, I still think what I'm going to say applies. But just to be clear, that
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah, yeah.
um, so again, now we see the president, to quote Rahm Emanuel, "You never let a good emergency go to waste. You never let a good crisis go to waste." Um, the president once again tightening down to on what he thinks should be his control of the media, and I say that very deliberately. I don't mean that
No,
hyperbolic.
that's been a theme of the administration is they believe that they should have some control over the media. Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC and Trump loyalist, has the ammo to put the squeeze on Disney and ABC. I don't know that they have any pending mergers or acquisitions that he can
Like
stall
last time.
like last time or like he did with CBS, right? To pressure Colbert off the air or
Yep.
to retirement. Um, but Mike, again, I'm a free speech advocate. I think that right and that concept, not just the right, but the spirit of the First Amendment is nearly absolute. And I do believe in those high bars for free speech.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's
What
why
do you
we often say it's the most important part of the Bill of Rights.
what do you make of the president again, like literally within 24 hours with these calls and his cronies, of course, to in essence censor Jimmy Kimmel, censor ABC?
Well, it's a bad move. It's a bad move for the reasons you point out in terms of liberty, democracy, protecting the First Amendment. It's not the way things should work. It sets a bad precedent. It's not good for us in the long run. All of that is true.
Mm,
I think we should not lose sight of the fact that uh, it's also illegal.
right.
The courts are not going to back me up on that, but it is true. It's illegal. The federal government is not allowed to, and the courts have ruled on this. The federal government is not allowed to coerce and intimidate people into changing the things that they would say. But there's something else going on here, which is the president is trolling libertarians and Democrats and folks who are liberty minded into reacting. For people like you and me, it works,
Mm,
right? You know, you and I are obliged to say the president shouldn't have done this, which is exactly what he wanted. He
right.
doesn't care about you and I reacting. What he wants is the Democrats reacting, looking slightly silly, setting their hair on fire so that his own base can point out how dumb the Democrats look.
Right.
So he's trying to point out that there are a lot of people who don't like him and don't like the first lady and say stupid things, and we should hate them.
This is very similar to the Charlie Kirk playbook after Charlie Kirk.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. What Kimmel had said about Charlie Kirk, uh, I thought was slightly mistaken. I thought it didn't come out well. It wasn't managed well. Kimmel should have said what he was going to say differently. It would have been okay with me if he didn't say anything related at all. But
Right.
given he just had to say something, I thought it came out a little bit sideways on him, and his apology was sufficient for me personally. But the Trump people jumped all over him in order to, even if not all the Trump people realized this was the reason they were doing it, the smarter ones did, which is you do it to get Democrats to react hard and to amplify your base.
Right.
It's all about divisiveness. It's
Right.
not even about the content itself. It's about the divisive reaction. And that begins when you find yourself an enemy, right? You need to find someone that you can be mad at, whether it's because they did something stupid or they said something that you don't like or because they said something that insults your base or your friends or your event, right? Or your security. And that's what this is all about. This is just about divisiveness. And that I believe is really the biggest of the pictures
Right.
that concerns me is that our political environment is dehumanizing because divisiveness works. And it creates this incentive structure for people to continue being dehumanizing to each
Right.
other. We treat people in the United States as though they're not Americans. We treat fellow Americans badly just because they have a different political outlook than ours in a way that we didn't used to. But the reason we do it the past couple of decades is because it works better than it used to. Because it works. We've learned that it works. That's
Right.
why people do it. So people are doing things that are, in my view, per se unethical, but they do it because it works. And I think that that's really sad. I think that's a really horrible thing. And the people on the right do it, the people on the left do it, which is why, John, I say all the time, American politics is broken into two teams. On the one team is all the people on the left who would divide us to advance their political ambitions, and all the people on the right who would divide us to advance their political ambitions. And on the other team is all the rest of us.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think when when you mentioned earlier, like the whether or not this type of divisiveness yields violence or not, that's why I say I don't know. But if anything can get right up against that line without crossing it, I think that's where we're at right
Yeah.
now, because the basic civility, aside from all the logical reasons why, and let's focus on the president's comments after this. I understand there's examples, like you said, the whataboutism runs rampant here. I get it.
Yeah.
But just to focus on this recent one, um, to your point, I am positive the president, the first lady, anybody else who was sitting on that dais did not for once initially think, oh, wow, Kimmel put out a call.
Right.
Like, even if they were aware of the joke in real time, no one cared. All right. They may have thought it was in poor taste or haha, but the point is to then within 24 hours say, you know what, we've got this groundswell of support for the president. Let's capitalize on it by referring to every political opponent as someone contributing to this. And now let's wait, let's call for Kimmel's firing, and let's wait for the typical Democratic response, which would be to defend him and defend free speech. And then,
Absolutely.
right,
And it should remind us, just to jump in here and support your assertion that there's whataboutism. Look, Caroline Leavitt said, talking about the event,
yeah,
not talking about a different context like Kimmel was, there's going to be shots fired. Well, she didn't mean, come on, people.
right, right,
She did not mean anything violent was going to happen. Shots fired is an old saying that we use all the time
right.
regarding people taking pot shots at each other verbally. No one should think that Caroline would say that violence is okay or that she anticipates it's going to be. Come
Yeah,
on.
yeah, and you're absolutely right. The logical inconsistencies are just so rampant but that's where the fear exists, right? The fear exists that when you have enough of a populist movement, that you can get these anti-free speech
Yeah.
laws or
That,
things through because people are reacting to something in the heat of the moment.
that's right.
bad cases make for bad law, that old saying. So you really don't want to be. So, okay. Last thing I want to transition into is that also within 24 to 48 hours after the incident, we had some Republican politicians, notably Senator Lindsey Graham,
Yep.
uh, a staunch supporter of the president since at least 2018, um,
Yeah.
saying like, "Hey,
McCain's passing turned him loose.
yeah, yeah," uh, that really what this whole incident shows us is that we really have to build out the president's vision for a White House ballroom. That of all the things we can do right now and of all the things we can stump for, that's it. And by the way, what he snuck into that, like up until now, Mike, I think you and I can agree. The president's vision for this grand ballroom, as gaudy as it was to have a secure place to hold state events, and that it was all funded by private donations,
Yep.
by
Yep.
private contributors.
Yep.
And the reason there's a lawsuit where construction has halted is precisely for that. Like, you're not supposed to have people as generous, even if their intentions were pure. There's a reason why all the funding has to go through Congress, is to avoid even the appearance of corruption, right? So
Yeah, you
that's
can't have people giving the president a room or a house
where
or an
planes,
airplane
right,
or Bitcoin.
or Trump coin or whatever it is, because again, emoluments clause, and for the life of me, I don't understand why this is allowed to the most openly corrupt type of gift giving that I can remember. But that aside, the president claimed 200 million from private sources to build this secure ballroom, which would be the best and the greatest the world has ever seen. Lindsey Graham snuck in. That's why we need this $400 million ballroom. And I think the taxpayers would be okay with funding it if it meant keeping the president safe. Now, he said a lot of other gibberish around that particular phrase, Mike, but that's the one that stuck with a lot of people.
Yep.
Um, and that he argued for transparency. Let's have a vote on it, yada, yada,
Yeah.
yada.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I hate the way he's trying to sell it. I think the correct response is if you cared only about the president's security, you would be offering a bill that addressed only the president's security.
Right.
I think a lot of people would be supportive of a bill that maybe added a few dollars for Secret Service,
Mhm.
Of a bill that added some things to the ballroom to make it more secure, right? Hardened that outer perimeter, maybe an extra layer of lobby, uh, extra thick glass in a few places, observation decks and layers,
Right.
multiple levels of platform, uh, an extra tunnel if it's not already in I don't know what's incorporated into the existing design, but a tunnel, certain provisions for back entrance and front entrance and side entrance, um, certain provisions for the entrance of law enforcement in an emergency as well as exit. There's any number of bells and whistles that are important to secure a facility like this. And to the extent to which you can use your imagination and come up with some that haven't already been drawn in by the architect, you could add those in a bill, right? If this was your concern, you would say, not, therefore we need the ballroom. You would say, given that we're going to have this ballroom,
Right.
that's going to be paid for by private sector money, let's do our part as the federal government and throw in an extra $38 million, whatever the number is,
Right.
to add an extra layer of security based on what we just learned about the Washington Hilton event. I think that would be logically more consistent and would survive closer scrutiny from people who are skeptical of Lindsey, who I think in most cases Lindsey means well. Sometimes he says some really dopey things, and I
Right.
think that this is one of them.
Right.
And by the way, the fact that it was sold as private money is one of the reasons why so many Republicans put up with the fast track of knocking down the East Wing without a lot of public buy-in, right? And the idea of starting construction without buy-in, all of that was fast-tracked in a way that I thought was handled very badly, by the way. But
I agree.
again, my constant theme is the president is surrounded by people who don't serve his interests well. This should have been handled very much more slowly and methodically, and it wasn't. But the reason that the White House decided to do it that way is because they thought they didn't have to worry about anything because they had private money. You can't turn around after the fact and say, "Oh, never mind," and you're going to pay for it, right?
Yeah, this is FUBAR beyond, you know. Look, the and again, the reason the lawsuit, and it was interesting that in this back and forth demanding the money, someone brought up the fact that, like, well, there's still this lawsuit. I forget the society that
Yep.
actually had the standing to do it right now. I apologize. They said in this lawsuit where they correctly pointed out, like, you can't just have anybody donating ballrooms and airplanes or whatever. That, that's in violation of the emoluments clause. Um, that Graham said, "Oh, well, maybe they should just drop the lawsuit so we can get that private money and then we could add the taxpayer money to it." And, that group said, "No way. That's the whole point of this, right?" Like,
Right.
the reason we're saying this is it should all be funded by Congress. So if Congress approves it, the whole amount has, then you can let the people decide, was it a good expenditure, if
Right.
people are paying attention or not. So
Absolutely.
I agree with you, Mike. And this reminds me a lot of what allegedly Teddy Roosevelt used to do when Congress wouldn't give him money to go off and fight a war. He would just say, "I'm the commander in chief. We're going to be conducting exercises, coincidentally, right next to where we want to have this."
Right.
And
Right.
then when the fleet runs out of oil and fuel, then you decide whether you want to leave them there or bring them back.
That's
You know,
exactly right. And just backing into it. Look,
right?
I think one of the ironies is that if the president had played his cards correctly from the beginning, and I really should say if the people surrounding him had played their cards correctly from the beginning, because again, I think it's okay for the president to say, we need a ballroom, right? But the people surrounding him have got to be better than to let the boss plan this soup to nuts, like he's the architect and engineer in charge.
Right.
Very poorly served. Maybe that's his fault, maybe it's not, but he's been very poorly served in this regard. If the White House had played their cards correctly
Right.
and they were moving this slowly, getting people's buy in,
Right.
where would we be today? We would be in a stalled process about design and money and the East Wing's historical significance. Bam, all of a sudden you've got this event at the Washington Hilton and everybody falls in line. The president gets what he wants and he doesn't have to look like a jerk to do it.
Right.
And I think that one of the ironies is that, in effect, he's missed his opportunity
Oh, sure.
because now, right now, Lindsay comes up with, well, now we, $400 million, and well, now you just all look stupid.
Well, and just on the very practical level, odds are they're not going to have the House in November after November's election. So to move it ahead legislatively probably isn't going to occur between now and November. So if
Right,
that,
and you handled it badly in the beginning, and you only got one bite of the apple because you're gonna have an orange instead of an apple come November.
yeah, and if the court ruling goes against them and they can't get that bribery money in there, they're going to be stuck. And
And it's
look,
a shame because although the White House handled this badly, the president was right in the beginning. The White House needs a ballroom. The White House has always needed a ballroom. As someone who has been one of only a few hundred people crammed into what we used to call the Indian Treaty Room, you're not allowed to call that anymore, right? But having been crammed into that room, the White House does not have the space that it should have.
right.
The White House needs a ballroom. And anyone around Washington should know that, right? Anyone should know that. If this was handled correctly, this wouldn't even be contentious.
Right.
There's plenty of room, there's plenty of money, there's plenty of motivation. this could have been handled in a way that made everybody happy, right?
Right.
All the former first ladies would have weighed in. Oh, let's protect something of the East Wing because it's got its historical significance. But as someone who has hosted big parties there, we need a ballroom. Everyone could have weighed in, right?
Right.
And then when this event breaks and the security is highlighted, all the curmudgeons would have fallen in place too.
Right.
It's true. The White House needs a ballroom. And now I think that another great irony is we may not get it because this was handled so badly.
Right.
It's just irony after irony.
It is. It is. And I just thought it was funny because, again, Rahm Emanuel, perhaps unknowingly, said what really sums it up. You never let a good crisis go to waste. And you see it with the opportunity to try to control the media, and you see it with the opportunity to try to get taxpayer funding through circuitous routes for the ballroom. And we'll see if the coming days provide yet another opportunity for the administration or its opponents to use this incident for some political gain.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll
All
see.
right. Mike, tell us about this book you wrote.
Well, I appreciate that. Let me grab a copy of it as long as you brought it up. We call it, and I know why you're bringing it up today, is because it's called Broken. It's a collection of essays all about how American politics is driving civil unrest, financial collapse, and war. And it's particularly important this week because one of the things that you and I are worried about is the idea of our political environment contributing now to domestic violence, right?
Right.
This is the civil unrest piece of war and financial collapse and civil unrest. This is a book of essays not written by me. I wrote a little piece of the book, but tremendous people participated in this and talk about the fact that our politics has to change or we will face these existential crises. Not to mention, we're not going to get the ballroom we need. And, we're going to do a lot of dopey things that are probably less important. And I don't mean the ballroom is unimportant, but we have even bigger fish to fry, like a federal financial collapse and war and really profound civil unrest. And now, if we're heading into a period of domestic violence, and I pray that we're not, it's just going to heighten the importance of fixing our politics. So everyone go to MikeTremont.com and check out the book. You can find it on Amazon as well. Thanks for letting me plug that. I'm hopeful that we're not heading into a period of profound civil unrest and domestic political environment, but me hoping that that's the case and it being the case are two different things.
I share your hope for that, Mike. And yes, everyone, please go to MikeTremont.com or scan the QR code below if that's easier. Check out the book Broken. A lot of great essayists included in that book, which, we're going to have a series out on that too shortly once we collect all the interviews with the.
Yeah, you and I are interviewing a bunch of them. That's very exciting. We've already done a couple, and just to tease it up, really fascinating. I mean, everyone thinks that you and I are fascinating, John. These are even more fascinating.
Agreed. 100% in agreement on that. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for this episode of Liberty Lens. Do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. Really appreciate you doing that. And as always, come back again next week when we cover the latest. Until then, peace, everyone.